Good evening and welcome. My name is Ralph Long III, and I am the chair of the Reparations Committee for the Mystic Valley Area NAACP. And on behalf of our branch, I would like to welcome you to this Racial Justice Candidate Forum, and thank you for taking the time to be here. An informed community is a stronger community. Forums like this give voters an opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, learn where they stand on important issues, and make thoughtful, informed decisions. We are grateful to the organizers, our community partners, and the candidates for participating in this important conversation. We also would like to thank each and every one of you for taking time to stay informed and engaged in our democratic process. We hope today's forum provides helpful information as you prepare to cast your vote. Thank you for joining us, and please remember to vote. Enjoy the forum.
I'm Carrie McDonald, and I'm one of your candidates for State Senate in the Fifth Middlesex District. I am a three-term Malden City Councilor at large. I'm a working parent. I've got 2 kids in the schools, and I'm a nonprofit executive in my day job. And I'm running because so much is at stake in our communities. We feel the squeeze in just about every way, and my priorities are to fight the Trump administration, to make sure that we're sticking up for our neighbors, we're protecting our rights, and we're rebuilding our economy. To fund our schools and our communities. I was a part of the override push in Malden that narrowly failed, but we know that this is a problem across all of our communities to make sure that we have enough resources to fund our basic city services year over year, and that definitely includes the schools. And 3, to make life more affordable with utility bills and healthcare and housing and childcare. And I believe in democracy and transparency. I support the state legislative audit. I think these are basic things that we need to make our democracy work. I really want to thank Fighting for Black Lives and the Mystic Valley NAACP and the League of Women Voters in Winchester and Melrose for hosting this forum. I'm the only candidate in this race who is Black, Indigenous, or a person of color. I myself am multiracial. My dad is Black, descended from slaves in the South. My mom is white, descended from English settlers in the North Shore and communities like ours. And I've been fighting for racial justice since high school, my whole life. So it means a lot to be a part of this forum and to be able to talk about these issues and share with you. So I look forward to speaking with you all virtually. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ryan O'Malley, and I'm running for State Senate in the Fifth Middlesex, which includes Malden, Melrose, Wakefield, Stoneham, Reading, and Winchester. I'm running for 3 main reasons. The first is to reform how we fund education in the Commonwealth. I believe that your zip code should not dictate the quality of your education. And I approach this from first a municipal official perspective. I've been on the City Council for 11 years, and I've seen the impact of dwindling state aid on our communities. It forces cities and towns to do overrides which are divisive even when they're necessary, really dividing our community and tearing at the fabric. I believe there needs to be another way in a progressive state like Massachusetts, and I believe that that way is progressive taxation. That could be a wage tax or income tax. It's going to take a lot of work, but I think we need to work hard to make sure we have the best education in the entire nation. Second is to bring government accountability to Beacon Hill. We're the only state in the nation that doesn't require our legislators to comply with public records and open meeting laws. I believe that these are good governance laws that are followed by cities and towns, and they should be followed by the state legislature. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. I also support the audit of the legislature. I believe these are just good ways in which we can have confidence in what's going on in Beacon Hill. It cannot just only be about holding Trump accountable. We have to also hold our state accountable. And lastly, protecting public assets. I'm a former park ranger in the Middlesex Fells and Breakheart, and so I know what it takes to protect public assets, whether it's our schools, our parks, our libraries, or our public finances. We need to do whatever we can to make sure that we're preserving them so that we have the resources to educate our students and so that we have the resources to really take care of our amazing public assets that make this a great place to live. So I hope I can have a chance to earn your vote on September 1st, which is the Democratic primary. I'm a Democrat. I've been a Democrat for a long time, and I can't wait to help bring accountability, reform education, and protect public assets in Beacon Hill. Please join me in this race. Ryan O'Malley for State Senate, o'malleysenate.com. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kate Lipper-Garabedian, and I'm running to be the next state senator for the 5th Middlesex District. I'm a former teacher, an education attorney, the mother to 2 boys in the Melrose Public Schools, and for the last 6 years, I've represented 3 of the 6 communities in the Fifth Middlesex. I'm running for state senate because I know I have the right experience, the right values, and a track record of success on Beacon Hill to get things done and deliver for you and your families as your next state senator. I take on this role and this challenge at a time when the stakes could not be higher, when we need someone on Beacon Hill who has shown success and will be ready to go from day one. I'm thinking specifically about the cruelty and chaos of the Trump administration and how honored and proud I am to have joined Massachusetts leaders and championed bills and laws that are important for us here in asserting our values. We have stood firm on access to reproductive health care, including abortion and gender affirming care. We have stood firm on protecting immigrants and the immigrant community. We have stood firm on validating and supporting our LGBTQ plus community. We believe in climate science and addressing a green future that is worthy of our grandchildren. And we have supported gun safety legislation to make sure we remain the safest state in the nation, protecting our kids from gun violence. I will do all of those things and build on our success as the next state senator. I also know that it is a challenging time to live in Massachusetts, whether you're a young family starting out or an older adult entering retirement. It is expensive to live here, and we continue to need to lead on the levers that we can have at the state level to support families through their life cycle. I'm thinking about the historic investments I've supported in housing production and in supporting our mass transit system, which is so important to the Fifth Middlesex, or making childcare more affordable for working families like my own. I'm thinking of the importance of leaning into the tax relief legislation that we passed a couple years ago, including the provisions I had proposed to support renters. As your next state senator, I will continue to lead on these efforts, building coalitions, listening to experts and key advocacy organizations to make sure that we are building a Massachusetts that is more livable and affordable for everyone in it. I'm asking for your support and your vote by September 1st. Thank you.
Topic 1: Racial disparities in student discipline. This question is based on discipline data that school districts have reported to the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The following analysis is based on 13 school years, from 2012-13 to 2024-25. In Massachusetts, as well as in the municipalities in the Fifth Middlesex District, Black students are disciplined at higher rates than white students. Here we see the discipline rate among Black and white students. The discipline rate for Black students is calculated by the number of Black students reported disciplined divided by the total number of Black students in that district. That is shown in the red bars. The discipline rate for white students is the total number of white students disciplined divided by the total number of white students in the school district. And that is the blue bar. Massachusetts is provided at the far right as a comparison, and that's the data reported across all the school districts in Massachusetts. So across all of Massachusetts, 7.7% of Black students were disciplined and 2.6% of white students were disciplined. Question 1: what precise steps would you take in your first 2 years to reduce school discipline disparities?
I just want to start by acknowledging that, through my role as an elected official and as a white presenting person, I'm in positions that hold power. I'm aware of that, how my position impacts this space. And I bring that awareness both to the work, but also in terms of educating others and myself in this process. So I do want to highlight that, I have a role to play in this conversation, but I'm not the primary stakeholder. I'm not here to be a savior, but I am here to be an ally of marginalized communities. So I do not pretend to know everything. And the way what I would do as a state senator would be first to engage various constituencies, student advocacy groups, PTOs, DESE officials, that's the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, local school district administrators, and teachers unions, to make sure that I'm speaking to people who are closest to the pain, who understand really what's going on and how we can improve this situation. Developing those deeper connections is how you learn from experts. Like, again, I said, I don't know everything, but I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to have those conversations to collaborate to make sure that we're bringing the great common sense solutions that are backed up by data and actually have improved learning outcomes for all students, particularly Black and Brown students. So, based on those conversations that I've had already and that I will continue to have, I would be brainstorming legislation to encourage, common sense changes that will help, like I said, improve learning outcomes. This could include, eliminating zero tolerance rules and restorative justice practices. We could be, launching implicit bias trainings, or establishing support networks for behavioral interventions. Again, I'm not going to say that I pretend to know everything, but I am here to work and develop and strengthen those connections and those collaborative efforts so that we can get the best possible outcome and the best possible legislation.
As a former teacher and the mother of two students in public schools, one in elementary and one in middle, the issue around student discipline and racial disparities is incredibly troubling to me. I think specifically about my own experiences being at the head of a classroom. I think also about being a member of the Richmond City Public Schools when I was growing up. I was actually a racial minority for the first 9 years from kindergarten through 8th grade, which is pretty rare, I think, in these days for a middle class white student. There were more Black students in my classroom than white. I also note that the Fifth Middlesex District is host to many races of students, not just Black and white. Look no further than Malden, which is incredibly rich and represented by dozens of different nationalities and ethnic backgrounds. So in terms of the next state senator and what I would do to address continuing disparities in school discipline, we'd want to lean in, of course, on professional development and reviewing the data that is being collected by DESE to make sure that districts are being able to unpack the data, think about specific concerns, and then receive targeted interventions from the state and from thoughtful nonprofit partners, perhaps. I think, for example, of being on the Safe and Supportive Schools Commission as a commissioner when I worked at the Executive Office of Education, and the important role that community groups and community-based organizations can play in really unpacking some of this data. I also want to hold up the Crown Act as an example where the legislature can step in as well if we need to update our own non-discrimination laws. I was so proud to vote for that bill that is now a law in Massachusetts, ensuring that students cannot be disciplined for wearing their hair in traditional ethnic backgrounds, an issue that came directly from this district, and so proud to have elevated local experience and local voice in supporting that law.
Our first question is what precise actions I would take in my first 2 years as a state senator to reduce school discipline disparities. And this is the first of the questions that the forum has set up that are very helpfully grounded in data. So you can see the disparities that we're talking about. A lot of appreciation to fighting for Black lives in our neighborhoods for putting some of this data together or going to get it. And that's the first thing I want to say is that we do need to have this data and reporting be standard, be consistent so that we can keep an eye on it and know what's happening. That's the first step. But that is never going to be enough because there's so many ways in which you can interpret data differently. So I would support the RAISE Act, which is requiring accountability for inequities in suspension and expulsion, RAISE Act, that one of our state reps, Steve Altrino, sponsors. I'd be happy to sign on as a co-sponsor of the Senate version that requires school districts to report this data, to have a plan in place, and to be looking at ways to reduce the use of suspension and expulsion, and then report on the outcomes of that. So those kinds of state level policy things make a big difference. But really, this is grounded in the fundamental inequities that we see across the state, and that's what the data shows. In Malden, we see the least awful disparity. It's only 1.5 to 1 is the ratio between white and Black students' disciplinary records. And the two pieces that I take away from that, because I live in Malden and my kids go to Malden Public Schools, is that Malden, one, is a pretty integrated district. We have the most diverse high school in the state, 25% white, 25% Black, 25% Latino, 25% Asian. And that means that people are getting access to a much wider range of folks. We know that integrated schools are the gold standard for improving educational outcomes. And while Massachusetts has accomplished some of that through busing, and that's been important. That's really what we want to head towards. Second is that Malden, and I know this, and I'm less familiar with other districts, but Malden requires alternatives before suspension and expulsion are considered. Mediation, restorative justice, anything that's going to try to keep kids in school, because again, the research shows how important that is for learning outcomes, as well as avoiding what we call the school to prison pipeline, which gets kids, especially Black and brown kids, in this disciplinary set of consequences that all too often leads to juvenile hall or prison. So I think the policy of requiring those alternatives is really important. It's an important part of the RAISE Act, and just working towards overall integration so that the zip code where you grow up doesn't just determine where you go to school, and that families have more choices and more access to great schools.
Topic 2, educator representation. This question is based on data from the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education school district profiles. In the 2023 school year, most of the municipalities in the Fifth Middlesex District had no teachers who identified as Black. In this chart, you can see the percent of Black teachers and percent of Black students in the Fifth Middlesex District school districts. The percent of Black teachers are the red bars, and the percent of Black students are in the blue bars. We show the percents for each of the municipalities in the Fifth Middlesex District, and again, the Massachusetts percents are available on the far right for comparison. This is a loss for all students and is especially harmful for our Black students. Research shows that when Black students have Black teachers, they are more likely to thrive academically and less likely to be suspended. Question 2. In your role as senator, what will you do to hire more Black teachers and to increase the number of Black students who seek a career in teaching?
So this next question also speaks directly to what I care so passionately about as a state representative around educator diversity. There is incredible research that demonstrates that students of color really thrive academically and have demonstrable positive impacts when they have teachers who reflect their own background. And so not having enough teachers of color to reflect what the student population looks like is holding our kids back. We know that about half of students in Massachusetts public schools are students of color, but only about 10% of educators are. So that's why I was thrilled to support the Educator Diversity Act that was signed into law in the last legislative session. It does so many things. It makes sure that we have new licensure pathways for teachers. It creates a pilot apprenticeship program. It ensures that districts have diversity plans, DEI leadership, and important professional development. There's also a critical component around data collection so we can measure the impact of this type of policy and think about ways to continue to ensure fidelity to it. In this session, I've been proud to partner with Latinos for Education to file proposals for early college programs specifically to support students of color who are interested in being classroom leaders down the road. I've also supported the Teach for America program, which is the second largest preparation program now in Massachusetts for onboarding teachers of color, which has been so important. So I'll continue to look for opportunities to partner with important nonprofit organizations, preparation programs, and school districts in seeing this work to the finish line as your next state senator.
Question 2, what would I do as a state senator to increase the number of Black teachers and Black students who seek a career in teaching? Again, a great question that is so clear in the data that we're looking at, what a big need there is. And in Malden, again, we have the most diverse community and maybe the most Black teachers, but 3% is far from actual representation. So what can we do about it? The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education just released a report this summer that gives a lot of recommendations, everything from incentives and tuition and loan repayment to compensation. And so I think we're going to dig into those things next year in the next legislative session. I commit to being an active participant and sponsoring bills based on those conversations. And I want to focus on a couple things that I think are really important. One is that if you come from a community or family where you don't have the resources to take on loans to begin with, then it can be really hard to get through to make good on those loan repayment programs. So having programs that are pathways that start with that recruitment allows you to work with community organizations like the NAACP to make sure that folks are thinking about that at the student level. Then if you have alternative pathways to licensure, folks may not have to take on that level of debt. They may be able to get their license or their degree while they're teaching, which allows folks who have different life circumstances to participate. And then being able to support folks who actually make it to the classroom. It can be really tough to be the only, I've often been the first, the youngest, the only person of color, and it can be really isolating. So making sure that teachers are connected to each other. This is a great place where we could work more closely with unions who can support their members in a different kind of way than the state can or than the district can. And so I'd love to see that collaboration in addition to community groups. I'm very proud to be endorsed by the Boston Teachers Union, the biggest educator local in the state, because I support the success of educators across the spectrum. But making sure those pathways exist to support people. And when you don't come from a lot of money, as like I didn't, my family didn't have a lot of money. I went to inner city public schools. I made it through college on scholarship. I went to grad school, at night school, and just having those pathways that you can count on are so important for making new things seem possible. One other thing that I'll note is that it's not only teacher representation, it's also curriculum representation. Making sure that you as a student can see yourself and in the stories and the authors that you're reading. I know I didn't always have that. And that makes you feel empowered to be a part of the educational process. I went and read a book to a diverse classroom in an elementary school in Malden. And it was about having a name that people couldn't pronounce and about how the kid learns to stick up for themselves. And the students wrote me letters back about how much that meant because they had a different name. And just being able to have someone share that to them was so empowering.
Growing up, I had amazing teachers, and when I was considering this question, I realized that I really only had one black teacher in my experience. But I, more personally, I remember having LGBTQ and gay teachers that, having those people in my life as kind of role models helped me kind of on my own journey when it comes to being an LGBTQ person. So I think this is a really important conversation to have, and I appreciate the question. In Malden, personally, I fought to preserve, DEI positions in Malden, including language access, which our administration, unfortunately, was proposing to completely axe. We were able to bring those back, and that's a huge point of pride for me, standing up with our communities to make sure that, we do preserve these. I fought for, language access and translation in City Hall when we were building a new City Hall. And, in my own personal journey, I've attended trainings with like Malden Core, which is the community organizing for racial equity. And I've learned about saviorism and intersectionality. As the first openly LGBTQ elected official in Malden's history, I understand what it's to be marginalized. But that doesn't mean that my marginalization is the same as someone else's. And these things are still happening to the LGBTQ community, as well as people of color in all communities. When it comes to incentivizing teachers of color, I think that we need to make sure that the experience is good for students of color who are there. If we want to recruit students to become teachers, we have to really understand like what is their experience going to be like when they're actually in school. Do they want to return to that environment? No one wants to return to a toxic environment. So I do believe it's essential that we make sure that the experience for students is great, so they want to come back and maybe be teachers. It reminds me of, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley saying of, start by connecting with those who are closest to the pain because they're going to be closest to the solution. So education is a cornerstone of my campaign. So I believe improving student outcomes is essential, and that is the first step to actually helping build a pipeline for educators who come from the district. There are some like specific examples. There are today's students, tomorrow's teachers program. Grow your own teachers. There are ways in which we can help elevate these programs, whether it be funding or just me using my ability to convene and connect. But I would be in this fight in a in a way that is authentic and not performative, which I think is just so essential when it comes to working in these spaces. Thank you.
Topic 3, racial disparities in arrest. This question is based on arrest records data that police departments have reported to the Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security. The following analysis is based on 19 years of data from 2007 to 2025. In the 2020s, across the Fifth Middlesex District municipalities, the total number of Black people arrested has declined compared to previous decades. However, Black people now account for an even higher share of all arrests. So here in this chart, there are two data points that have been graphed. The red bars are the total number of Black people arrested across the Fifth Middlesex District municipalities. So all the arrest records provide race information, and this is the sum of all the records where the race was identified as Black. That is the red bar. The blue line takes that total number of Black people arrested and divides it by the total number of arrests across these municipalities. So if you look at 2025, 124 Black people were arrested, and that accounts for 20% of all arrests across those municipalities. In Massachusetts, for Black people, both the number and share of total arrests have increased each year of the 2020s. This chart shows data across all the agencies reporting in to Massachusetts. Again, the red bars are the total number of Black people arrested, and the blue line is that number of Black people arrested divided by total arrest to give the share of arrests that Black people represent. As you can see in the 2020, the red bar gets taller each year and the line goes up each year. The black line has been provided at just over 10%, which is to represent the Black population in Massachusetts. So, which is 10.2%. So Black people comprise 10.2% of the Massachusetts population. But in 2025, the number of Black people arrested comprised 23% of total arrest. Additionally, in the Fifth Middlesex District municipalities and in Massachusetts, the percentage of Black people among those arrested is much higher than the percentage of Black people in the population. This chart shows in the red bars the percent of arrests who are Black people, and the blue bars show the percent of Black people in that municipality's population. Again, it's shown for each of the Fifth Middlesex District's municipalities, and Massachusetts is provided at the right for comparison. So looking at Massachusetts, across these years, Black people comprised 15.7% of total arrest, and that is compared to the population composition for Black people in Massachusetts of 10.2%. Question 3. As Senator, what steps would you take to ensure that police departments in Massachusetts are not engaging in policing practices that perpetuate systemic racism?
Question 3. What would I do to ensure that police departments in Massachusetts are not engaging in policing practices that perpetuate systemic racism? Let's talk about it, y'all, because I've been in this conversation for years in my community in Malden. It's actually how I got into local politics, is that I had been a part of local organizing around policing alternatives and accountability. I had been on a working group with the mayor reviewing use of force policies. And so we really needed more progressive voices who understood what it was like to be a person of color in this country, and who were going to have this conversation in public. And so once I got elected, I helped create Malden's Police Community Advisory Council. I am their liaison, and they get the kind of data that we've seen here in this forum about arrests, as well as earlier on like traffic stops, and specifically around use of force and department demographics. And what I've learned is how important it is to have that courageous conversation in public that is grounded in data, that is not about accusing people of specific things, but trying to look at the whole picture and understanding where the system is failing us. So that is absolutely what I would continue as a state senator. In 2020, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court released a landmark study that showed that we have racial disparities in every single part of our criminal justice system, from arrest and first interactions all the way through charges, trial, sentencing, prison, parole, and that we need to be looking at every single stage of that. So that starts with the initial interaction with police departments. So when we're talking about reducing arrests and making sure that we have equitable policing, that begins with making sure that policies are good and updated and reviewed and meet professional standards. It includes making sure that our officers are trained in de-escalation. Most of the calls that police officers respond to actually aren't criminal at all. They're everything from wellness checks to problems with folks with mental illness or disturbances. I really support having more programs to have other types of response to those nonviolent calls. We've seen really good programs start up in places like Lynn, Massachusetts, and I want to put forward grants to expand those because I think having folks who have a social work, mental health, addiction services background be able to respond to many of those calls just reduces the risk of something going wrong, and it helps relieve the police departments of the burden of dealing with these folks who have so many needs that they cannot answer by themselves. So that is something I would really push for, as well as making sure that this data is there and publicly available. I think that when we have police departments and leaders who are committed to engaging with the community about this in an ongoing way, that we can hear hard truths with each other, that makes a difference. And we've seen that in Malden. So I would be pushing for that and making sure that we have data, transparency, good policies and practices, and resources for alternatives to how we respond to the situations that can lead to arrests in the first place. I also want to support restorative justice in particular as a diversion after you're arrested from making it to court and making it to trial. Those have been really successful programs, again, working with police departments in many communities that I'd like to see expanded.
There's been a lot of great work around this in Malden, and I really want to highlight the hard work of Councilor at Large, Karen Cologne Hayes, who was previously our Human Services Officer and really helped build a foundation with a number of community organizations like Malden Corps to kind of really help change this narrative in Malden. There were like Malden's Promise, which has led coalitions and trainings talking about like no such thing as a bad kid. There's the Obama Use of Force commitment, which helped lead to a Police and Policy Accountability Committee. But training is essential in this area, and we have to have good data practices. We need to make sure that what we are capturing reflects what's really going on the ground. So data quality, I think, is really important here. As for specifics, obviously Massachusetts has the Peace Officer Standards Training Commission. So I believe strengthening that organization, tying municipal state aid to strict compliance with civil rights, and mandating independent investigations of officer alleged misconduct. I think also we need to understand that de-escalation is so essential in this space. And as part of that, I think this is something that is important for everyone to know, is that police are civilians. Like, we should not be militarizing our civilian police force. And I just think it's really important that we understand that. Police are civilians. They are our civilian police force. And I think that we have to expect them to act like civilians and not act like military.
As a state representative, one of my very early votes was to support the police reform law that was incredibly controversial And I received a lot of feedback from constituents who had very different opinions of this, but I was resolute in supporting it to ensure that we have a post commission that makes sure law enforcement officials have a state license, just like our teachers, that can be lost, which means that they're not able to continue to find new employment across different police departments if they are disciplined in one. And I think continuing to professionalize law enforcement, standardized practices across the state is incredibly important. And on this issue, of course, there is much work to do. So we're going to need to continue to lean into professional development and training for our police departments to make sure that they are aware of implicit bias, that they are unpacking the data that you have so helpfully provided, while also noting that, we're not just talking about a black and white issue. I was so proud this past month to support the PROTECT Act, which the governor just signed into law, to ensure that our local police departments are not pulled into the business of civil immigration enforcement. We are now prohibiting police officers from questioning someone about their immigration status or their background. I think that it's incredibly important in a multiracial community and commonwealth that we are addressing all aspects of racial discrimination and disparate impact. So continuing to provide police officers with the right amount of training and background, looking at our preparation programs as well to make sure as they are preparing to enter the force, they are aware of this data and thinking about ways to really combat it.
Topic 4, racial disparities in home loans. This question is based on home loan applications that lending institutions have reported to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau in compliance with the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. The following analysis is based on loan applications for mortgages for single-family owner-occupied homes. The analysis is based on 19 years of data from 2007 to 2025. In most municipalities in the Fifth Middlesex District, the mortgage applications from Black home buyers are denied at a higher rate than those from white home buyers. This chart shows the home purchase loan denial rates across the Fifth Middlesex District municipalities. The red bar is the denial rate for Black applicants, and the blue bar is the denial rate for white applicants. Again, Massachusetts is provided for comparison at the far right. So across Massachusetts, across these years, 23% of Black applicants had their loan application denied compared to 15% of white applicants. Black applicants are more likely to be denied than white applicants due to debt-to-income ratio and insufficient cash. So when application is denied, several reasons can be cited for why the application was denied. Here you see for all of the applications denied, the reasons provided, and this is across all the denials in the Fifth Middlesex District municipalities. So debt to income ratio was cited as a reason in 44% of the applications that were denied for Black applicants. Again, that's the red bar again is the reasons for denial for Black applicants. Debt to income ratio was cited in 34% of the applications denied for white applicants. Again, the white applicant denial rate is the reasons are in the blue bar. We also mentioned insufficient cash, and that, as you can see, the denial rate, or that was cited as a reason in 14% of the denials for Black applicants compared to 7% of the denials for white applicants. Debt to income ratio is the top reason for denials across all of Massachusetts. So again, we see the reasons provided for why the application was denied. This is across all applications provided, reported across Massachusetts. Again, the reasons for denial for Black applicants in the red bars, the reasons for denial for white applicants in the blue bars. So across all of Massachusetts, debt to income ratio was cited as a reason for 42% of the Black application denied compared to 35% of the white applications denied. Question 4. In your first 2 years, what steps would you initiate to increase the number of Black homeowners in Massachusetts?
This question is also, very important and interesting to me personally for two different reasons. The first is that I'm an affordable housing attorney by trade. And the second is I'm a student of history. And I think that the history is so important when we come to the lack of homeownership in the Black or brown community in our country. It largely comes from redlining, which prohibited people from moving into different areas or getting loans in different areas. And that was the official policy of like the U.S. government for a long time. And a lot of our de facto segregation to this day is a remnant of that redlining. Additionally, there's the GI Bill. So the GI Bill was an opportunity for returning veterans from World War II to get home loans, education loans, and the GI Bill was not available to veterans of color. These are just fundamental harms that are that we have to deal with to this day. And how do we reconcile that? How do we fix for those harms of the past? Like I mentioned, I'm an affordable housing attorney by trade, and so affordable homeownership opportunities are essential. We are not building enough homes in our community in our communities for seniors to age in place, for families to grow and flourish. And so I think it is really essential that we build more housing. As a state senator, I would fight for more affordable housing funds, and that would likely be through EOHLC, which is the Executive Office of Housing in Livable Communities, mass housing, making sure that we are funding and leading with our values when it comes to building and providing opportunities for people in our community, people of color, to really get that opportunity to own a home. I would not be where I am today if I didn't have the benefit of having stable housing, and that is just so essential. If you don't have a good night's sleep, it is really hard to go to work. It is really hard to be a good student. And so I think this is such an essential question, and I appreciate this question being put out there. Thank you.
Housing may be the most intractable issue when it comes to affordability in Massachusetts. And as a state representative, I've been proud to support the Affordable Homes Act, which is the single largest investment of state resources in housing production and policy ever, actually, historically. And, not only is housing challenging for anyone, as your data shows, there are also racial disparities and discrimination embedded into the system. So as a state senator and as a policymaker, we need to continue to focus on those nonprofit partnerships that assist with, making folks aware of the opportunities for grants and other resources that are available to become homeowners. I think of my own housing resource that I've put up on my website and updated over the last 6 years as a state rep as another example of supporting folks who are trying to make rent or make a mortgage. We also need to recognize that it's not just lower income people of color who may be having trouble. Even people who have the wealth behind them face discrimination in the process. So we need to make sure that we are supporting the enforcement mechanisms with the right resources to the Attorney General's office, to the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, and to other enforcement agencies, so that when people of color who are trying to purchase homes are denied, access because of racial discrimination, people are held to account. So as state senator, I'll continue with opportunities to expand opportunities to purchase. I'm thinking, for example, of the tenant right to purchase provision that I supported in the House's recent economic development bill, and all sorts of different tools to be available to people of color to be able to get support. That means elevating also and highlighting those nonprofit organizations, the banks and various credit unions that have particular programs that may be available to folks, making sure that we really celebrate those folks who are leaning in on addressing racial disparities and discrimination in housing.
Question 4. In the first 2 years, what would I do to increase the number of Black homeowners in Massachusetts? And this is such an important question because housing is a cornerstone issue. If you don't have stable housing, you can't hold down a job. It's hard to get well when you're sick. It's hard to get to school. It's hard to have your kids get to school. And homeownership specifically allows people to build wealth. That's been the main way that folks have built wealth in this country for generations. The communities of the Fifth Middlesex District have been a corridor of opportunity for immigrants, for folks who are born working class, to create a life for themselves and their families. And we feel that opportunity slipping away because we know the housing crisis is so acute and driving everything else up. So we have to tackle a bunch of those different pieces. The data that we're looking at here specifically looks at home loans and getting denied loans or having trouble closing. And I think that's really important because that's a big leverage point. And I say that as somebody who used a first-time home buyer program that allowed us to have a smaller down payment without the cost of mortgage insurance. I don't know how we would have come up with 20% to bid. And then helped make sure that we had some understanding about how to get through that process. It's very, very intimidating. If you don't have people in your orbit who have gone through this or gone through it recently, to figure out how to make decisions about property. And so everything we can do to support the community outreach so that people get in the door to talk about these programs, that banks know about them. I think we need to make sure that bank lending officers understand these programs so that they can represent them well to folks who come in, and that we, or other lending institutions, not just banks, and that we're really trying to create that pathway that folks can be a part of. There's other interventions I think that we need as well. Just helping to increase the supply of homes, like starter level homes is really important. 2 and 3 family units can often be much cheaper. That's different than the kind of luxury condos, which is often what manages to get built, but making sure that we have income and affordable housing, income restricted affordable housing. Those projects, when they come together, are huge opportunities for folks who are first-time home buyers. And we need to make sure that they are put in the fast lane when they come together in our communities because they're so rare. They're so hard to make work. So I want to support that supply issue so that there are more opportunities to bid for. I am also mindful how much people are getting outbid with just cash on hand. I think we need more standards about what can go into that interaction in a bid about a house or a condo, because we want to make sure that folks have a fair shot at being able to get that property. So I think some more standards about that would be really helpful. And then we just have to make sure that we're really enforcing the fair housing laws that we have. Some of those have been federal fair housing laws that now need to be backed up in state law because the federal government under Trump is coming after our communities. So I really want to make sure that all of those federal housing standards we've relied on the Department of Housing and Urban Development to have are also backed up in state law because we cannot count on the federal enforcement anymore. So those would be priorities of mine to improve homeownership among Black folks in Massachusetts.
Closing remarks. Reflecting on all of this, what actions will you take to advance racial justice, and how will you measure progress?
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss these issues with you and for the work that went into pulling the data and developing the questions. I've been glad to think about those issues with you, and as a state senator, I would continue to put the issues around racial diversity, access, and inclusion at the center of the work that I do. I think about that lens in almost all of the bills that come before me because it's so important that we consider comprehensively the challenges that we're facing and the solutions that we're proposing to make sure we are aware of these differences of experience, the continued embedment of systemic racism in many of the areas that we wish to address, and ensuring we're thinking about racial diversity across a wide lens. Obviously, Black and white is what you are focusing on today, but our Commonwealth is diverse with many rich backgrounds of ethnicity and race. And so as your state senator, I will be considering all those perspectives, recognizing that my district will be a rich tapestry of people and wanting to make sure that I put them at the center of the work that I do. Again, I think that I have the right values, the right experience, and a track record of success, leaning in on issues, including those related to DEI, celebrating it, building from my legal background, including working on access and diversity initiatives in private practice and for the State Secretary of Education. And for these reasons, I ask for your support and your vote on September 1st.
In closing, what will I do to advance racial justice, and how will I measure that progress as a state senator? I want to say as strongly as I can that racial equity, that fighting all forms of oppression, have always been at the heart of my leadership and my personal and professional commitments, and that would, of course, continue as a state senator. As a city councilor, I have gone to bat and put my name on the line for racial equity as a part of our Racial Equity Commission. As I said, I helped create our Police Community Advisory Council. I have fought for language access, translation, and interpretation services. In fact, I translate and interpret my own campaign materials because I want to make sure people can participate in democracy no matter where they're born, no matter who they are. I understand this very personally as a multiracial person who has grown up in different parts of this country and knows how much struggle there still is in our institutions. And I fought for that in boardrooms and city council rooms and in the halls of the legislature and on the streets of our communities, and I'm going to keep fighting. One thing that I can promise is that I will talk about racism and racial inequities. I will share data. You will know where I stand. And I firmly believe that change only happens in collaboration. And it only happens when we have the courage to have the tough conversations. So you will get both of those things from me, collaboration and courage. As state senator, we have to work together to get things done with our advocates, our community organizations, and our most impacted communities. That's always going to be how I lead. Right now, that may be about pushing back against ICE and immigration enforcement, trying to protect our neighbors from being kidnapped off the streets. And it might be something else in the next 2 years. But wherever the front lines are, I want you to know that I will be there fighting for equity, fighting for every person in our communities, and doing the best we can to protect one another. I'm very proud to be endorsed by Progressive Massachusetts, the Working Families Party, the Chinese Progressive Political Association, and many other progressive groups, unions, environmentalists, and local officials. Thank you for this time, and I look forward to earning your vote in the September 1 Democratic primary.
Thank you again to the organizers of this survey. I really do appreciate the opportunity. Me personally, again, my name is Ryan O'Malley. I'm running for state senate. I commit to elevating marginalized voices, which I have continued and have done for many, many years now, well over a decade. I commit to checking my own privilege, being aware that I present and come into rooms from a position of authority. And with that privilege, there is great responsibility. And I also commit to helping others on that journey. This would not be possible if it were not the help in the trainings I got from Malden Core. And so, being able to live with that and really kind of internalize that and really understand, how did I get here and how do I fit into the conversation? Taking up space when appropriate, but giving space when appropriate. In terms of how would I assess this performance and these commitments, gathering community feedback is essential. I personally like having tough conversations, whether that be about policy or otherwise. I like debating. And I want to be able to meet people where they are by hosting community gatherings, by having meet and greets, by having public forums. These things are so essential, but also making sure that they are accessible, that they're access to the public, and if need be, online, in remote, so people who are maybe working or have childcare duties, or maybe just can't, make it because of whatever reason. So I would commit to having, hybrid community conversations and gatherings so that we can make sure that I'm getting the feedback that I need to do my job effectively. So again, my name is Ryan O'Malley, running for state senate, and I really appreciate your vote on September 1st, which is the Democratic primary. I am a Democrat, a longtime Democrat, and I look forward to bringing good common sense change to Beacon Hill. Thank you.